Hello, welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42, and he is Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life on Twitter. And we're here talking about the day of Kershaw, where he is a monster favorite. He's minus 300 in most places, minus 320 in a couple spots. Obviously, Vegas loves Clayton Kershaw. Last time he faced this team at home, it was a perfect game, 15 strikeouts, pretty damn good performance. Obviously, that's pretty far-fetched to expect that tonight, but Vegas is saying that, they wouldn't be too surprised. And Kershaw's surface numbers don't look great, but he's still been pretty damn good this year. 30.3% strikeout rate, a 2.21 xFIP. So Kershaw's in a tremendous spot against the Rockies team that is bottom 6 in the league against lefties, almost 25% strikeout rate. 293 WOBA, just a terrible 108 team ISO. So everything going in the Dodgers' favor tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a massive, massive spread. And, I mean, like you said, he's by far the biggest favorite. I mean, there's no one else really even close. I'm looking for the second highest favorite right now, and I think it's Bumgarner.
Yeah, there's it looks
at
like
minus 135.
I see Keuchel and Cologne are right around 140-ish.
Yeah, they're right around that same range too. But I mean, that's not even half. Yeah. So I mean, you're almost having to lock him in cash games unless you somehow feel really strongly about one of these other guys. Which I mean, they're decent plays, but I mean, for the upside you're getting from Kershaw with almost what looks like a guaranteed win, it's really hard to go any other direction.
Yeah, and part of me is really hoping that some people look at his last game against Colorado in Coors Field and are worried about it and stay away from Kershaw. To those people, thank you. I will enjoy spending your money tonight. I just don't see any way around Kershaw, especially if you're playing on FanDuel. I mean, obviously, GPPs, everyone else is really in play because most players are going to be on Kershaw, so certainly there's going to be some pivots, and most of these pitchers should be really low owned. But a guy that's interesting that I think some people would be on is Dallas Keuchel, but I'm not a big fan at Toronto, or facing Toronto at home, best team in the league against lefties. I'm not touching him. I would play him against most teams, but not tonight. How about you?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. I really like him. He's been pitching great, but it just doesn't seem like an ideal matchup. The price is pretty solid on DraftKings, though. If you're looking for a GPP starting pitcher, too, I think he's a really strong play in that situation. I mean, he's definitely priced down because of the matchup, so it's built into his price a little bit. He's a guy that's probably worth 85 to 9,000, something like that. And he's only 7,700 today there, so I think he's a pretty strong GPP play there. Like you said, they're really good against lefties, have a ton of power, so that's always scary, but he keeps the ball down pretty well. So there's a chance he can throw a really nice game here. I mean, he's looked as good as anybody in the majors so far this season, and really for the last almost 12 full months now. I mean, he's a really strong GPP play there. I don't want to go look at him in cash games too much. As far as FanDuel GPP play, I like Bumgarner tonight quite a bit. We already mentioned he's one of the bigger favorites, top 5 there. Not nearly what Kershaw is, but at Cincinnati's a weird park because, I mean, their like total runs park factor is well below average, but their home runs park factor is just massive. And Bumgarner doesn't give up a ton of home runs. If he can avoid the long ball there, especially against guys like Votto, and I mean, Jay Bruce has looked pretty good over the last couple games, looking a little bit better. If he can avoid giving up the big, one home run that gives up 3 runs or whatever, if he can avoid a 3-run home run in this game, I think he's going to have a pretty strong game. He's not nearly the cash game play that Kershaw is, so I think he's going to be really low owned here, which is part of what makes me like him as a GPP play. You got to think if someone's paying 10,000, most of the time they're going to go up to Kershaw there just because the increased safety and upside. I mean, it's a lot to pass up. But, I mean, if Kershaw struggles a little bit like he did against Colorado last time, obviously that was in Colorado, so it wasn't as good of a pitching situation as it is tonight. But, I mean, Bumgarner could provide a ton of profit potential on that price if he can outscore Kershaw.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, like you mentioned, the Reds aren't a great team against lefties, but they do have a lot of power. 6th best ISO, 176. But And like you said, outside of that, they're pretty average. So if he can keep the ball on the ground, I think he's in a fine spot. And, if there's ever a time, what was it, a week ago, or right around a week ago, Kershaw, Felix Hernandez, and Bumgarner all pitched on the same night. Everyone was on Kershaw and Felix Hernandez, mostly Felix Hernandez. And Bumgarner had a great game under the radar, less than 10% on most spots.
Yeah.
So this is another one of those situations here where he's going to go really low owned. And, he should get plenty of run support because Jason Marquis on the other side, I'm sure we'll get to some hitters against him, but absolutely terrible against righties, not so great against lefties either. I think the Giants put up a pretty big number on him too.
Yeah, I think so too. So, I like a lot of Giants bats today, so that gives me some comfort as far as Bumgarner getting the win. Marquis, not a guy that scares me away. I like Posey quite a bit. A couple other guys in that Giants lineup, especially lefties. So that's what makes me feel pretty good about Bumgarner. Other options towards the top here, I don't feel great about. Tehran, not a favorite, not a guy I'm going after today. Just not in a good spot for that price. Jordan Zimmerman's kind of interesting as a GPP play at San Diego. He's been going a little bit deeper into games. The strikeouts really haven't been there, though. His stuff doesn't look good. But, if you can get 8 innings out of him, 5 or 6 strikeouts, that's going to be a pretty strong GPP play there. I don't feel great about it in cash games, though.
Yeah.
If we're looking at cash game guys, especially for secondary options on DraftKings, one guy I like quite a bit today at 5,500 is Jesse Hahn. Hasn't been really fantastic lately, but for only 5,500 against a White Sox team that is in a really big slump again, I think he's a pretty interesting play. He posted double-digit DraftKings points in 3 games in a row before he struggled over the last couple. He got hit around against Minnesota and Seattle a little bit, giving up 18 hits over those 2 games. But before that, he had given up 4 or less in 3 straight. Not a big strikeout guy, but good enough to get you some points there. His big thing is avoiding walks. He's not a huge walks guy, but when he does walk people, he gets into really big trouble with it. But for 5,500, I think he's a pretty decent secondary cash game play since, for the most part, we're going to be paying up for Kershaw in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side of that game, you got a guy that's a great GPP target, Carlos Rodon, who has only made 1 start. And you got to be encouraged by the fact that he threw 108 pitches in that game. So, obviously, they're not babying him like Garrett Cole with Pittsburgh. So, you don't have to worry about that. But you got big-time strikeout upside. And this is an Oakland team that, they hit righties really well. But they're second to last in the league against lefties. And have by far the worst team ISO at .06. So, 247 team WOBA. They still don't strike out a lot against lefties. But, this is a team that just does not hit lefties at all. So at $5,800 on DraftKings, and I believe he's $5,600 on FanDuel, I think he makes for a really nice GPP play tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a strong play. Definitely GPP because he's not the favorite there. But like you said, last game he had really nice upside. I think he went 6 into third and struck out 8 guys.
Yeah.
The stuff's definitely there. Like you said, a lot of the bats in the Oakland lineup are lefty-handed guys, and so they struggle with lefties. They can't really load up the lineup against lefties like they can against righties. Last time out, I think they started 7 or 8 lefties against a righty. Even when they're facing a lefty, they're running 5, 6 lefties out there sometimes, and that puts him in a great situation, especially for strikeouts. His stuff is really good lefty on lefty. He's been much better against lefties than righties in his minor league career, which is generally the case with a guy with good breaking stuff as a lefty. So this is like a perfect situation for him. Obviously, as a young guy, he's going to be up and down, so not a guy I really feel great about trusting, but as a GPP play, I love it. And even as a cash game play at these prices, it's not a bad play when you're coupling it with paying $12,000 almost for Kershaw.
Yeah, you're going to need to find some value, and you really don't want to sacrifice all your hitters in order to get another pitcher in. So, I'm with you there. And another interesting guy, the Red Sox are a team that is actually 26th in the league against lefties, 292 WOBA, a solid team ISO 158, and they don't strike out a lot. But on the other side, you got J.A. Happ, who's been pitching really well. And speaking of Oakland, he just faced them as a lefty and had a great game, 8 Ks in 5 innings, just 1 earned run. So $7,300 against Boston. I think he's going to be low owned because there's that perceived notion that Boston hits everyone, and they really haven't hit lefties at all this year. So I think he's an interesting tournament play there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting tournament plays today, especially because everyone's going to be so low owned because of Kershaw.
Yep.
Another guy I was looking at a decent one was R.A. Dickey. He hasn't been very good this year, but I feel like Houston's a really good matchup for him. They have a lot of guys who swing and miss a ton, and that's really ideal for a knuckleballer. If he can get guys to swing and miss at knuckleballs that are not elite, he can be in good shape. And we've seen him do the same thing he's done every single year, where like, I mean, if you just look at the last two games as an example, last game he went 6 innings, gave up 6 earned runs on 7 hits, and walked 3 guys. The game before that, I think he gave up 2 hits in 8 innings and struck out a couple guys in that game. I mean, he's been up and down, but his upside's been pretty nice, especially when he can get the win. And Toronto's bats have been looking great. We mentioned that they have a great matchup today. Facing a lefty, since they've been hitting lefties so well. I think he's a sneaky guy that could get a win here. His price is a little higher than I'd want, but I mean, he's going to be a super low on GPP option, and he's been above 15 DraftKings points in I think 4 of his last 6 games. He's been going pretty deep into games. That's the advantage of being a knuckleballer. Even when he's getting hit around a little bit, he still gives you those big innings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And the Astros, they're battling with the Cubs for highest strikeout rate in the league against righties, like you mentioned. So, I mean, they've got power, but like you said, I mean, when they're swinging the ball, they swing hard. They miss a lot. So he keeps the ball down, keeps it in the park, then I think he could eat up a lot of innings, like you said. So I think he's an interesting play as well. And outside of that, nobody I really feel like highlighting. I mean, Jake Odorizzi is interesting against Minnesota, but they've started hitting the ball a lot better.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's done a great job of keeping the ball on the ground. That was his big struggle before. He's still not even league average at it, but significantly better than last year. And his big struggle is home runs. He's only given up 1 home run this season. It was in his last game. So I think he makes for a solid GPP play, but not a guy that I'm going to be playing more than probably once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other guys we can mention in here. Bruce Chen is only 4,000 on DraftKings, facing a Texas team that's been hitting a little bit better lately, but I still think there's some decent upside there on that price. Nothing you're going to get super excited about for like cash games or anything, but I mean, 4,000 is just so cheap, and I mean, he's just a tournament play for me that will let you stack your batters a little bit more, even if you're playing Kershaw or even Bumgarner. I mean, I don't really want to play him, but for 4,000, I think he's a decent dart throw.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 40 or 50 hitters that are more expensive than him. So
yeah, exactly. And just playing around with the lineup right now with him in it, I mean, you can go like him and Kershaw in your lineup, and then you can still average almost 4,300 per hitter. So if you find one value hitter, you can be up around 5,000. You can play too low if you want. At shortstop, you can get some of the better outfielders. Load up at first base, maybe take a value at second base and shortstop, and have really any hitter you want, and that's with Kershaw in your lineup. So it adds a lot of flexibility there. I mean, he's quite a bit cheaper than basically anybody else that's playable. I mean, there's a couple other cheap guys on the board, but I mean, Butler's facing the Dodgers. They've been hitting well. We talked about Marquee. I don't think he has a very good chance at a win, which kind of takes him out of play for me, especially given the fact that he blows up all the time. David Phelps is probably the only other guy in that price range that I'm looking at, really. He faces Atlanta tonight. And he's been surprisingly consistent over the last few starts. At least 12 DraftKings points in 4 straight games. He has a 26 in there against Philly. Throwing a decent number of pitches. He's been between 90 and 100 each of the last 4 games. His big thing is he doesn't have strikeout upside, but for 4,900, you don't need a ton of strikeout upside. Surprisingly, I believe he's favored today. Is that correct?
I think he's a slight favorite. Let me check on that here real quick. He is. I don't even see. Oh, yeah, he is. He's minus 125 favorite.
Yeah.
Yep.
So small favorite. He's kind of another interesting cheap guy that I'm looking at quite a bit today. Probably more of the cash game side, I would say, if I'm looking at someone that cheap. He's a little bit cheaper than Han. If I'm going GPP, I'm probably just going Chen just because of the massive price discount for someone that cheap. But given the fact that Phelps can sneak the win in here, I feel pretty good about that. And Atlanta's been cooling off a little bit. Their bats were really hot to start the season when everyone expected them to be terrible. They're cooling off a little bit now. have been struggling over the last 5 or 7 games here. So I think he's got a little bit of cash game potential here as far as getting the win, maybe striking out 4 or 5 guys, getting 5 2/3, 6 innings deep.
Yeah, I can see that. And like you said, Braves struggling. They're right back around league average when they were top 10 for much of the first month. So, all right, moving over to catcher here. If I'm paying up at catcher, I'm paying for Buster Posey against Jason Marquis, who is terrible against right-handed bats. Obviously, great hitters park and great American ballpark. So, he's by far my top option at catcher.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way. It's really hard to argue for anyone else that much. Carlos Santana is probably the other guy I'm looking at. I always like him from the right side of the plate, especially when he's facing a average kind of lefty like Rodriguez today. I don't know if I want to pay more for Santana than Posey, though, especially on DraftKings. He gives you a little bit of a discount on FanDuel over Posey, but Posey just feels like so much better of a play today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's by far the top option, and there's some other interesting GPP options. Robinson Chirinos has a lot of power against lefties. He gets Bruce Chen tonight. He's $3,700. He's a guy that always tends to go under the radar. I believe he batted 6th in his last game here, so decent lineup spot. Not a guy that's going to get you 2, 3, 4 hits, but he's a guy that he could send one into the seats, even though the wind's blowing in a little bit there.
Yeah, definitely. As far as other value options go, not a ton I'm loving it at catcher. Chris Iannetta, if he's hitting in the top 6 of the order, I don't mind for $2,900 against a lefty in Chen. Nothing that I'm too excited about. The wind's blowing out to left there, which is nice. Pretty decently, almost 15 miles an hour right now, which is pretty solid. So I'm going to target some righties in that game against the lefty. The Angels lineup's been really struggling, but I think this is a decent day to target them in GPPs because of the weather. It's really nice, blowing out to left. They're facing a lefty. Don't have very many lefties in their lineup when they face a lefty, so I think that's a decent stack today. Not too much else I'm really liking as far as catchers go, though.
No, Jason Castro's in play because he's got upside. Obviously, if that knuckleball is not working, we know he's homered 2 of his last 3 games.
Yep.
That's pretty much all he is. He did get a single last night, so good for him. But pretty much a home run or bust with Jason Castro.
Definitely.
All right, moving on to first base. Of course, there's a lot of options. You already mentioned Santana. He's first base eligible as well. Edwin Encarnacion's really been heating up if you want to target him against Keuchel in Houston. Nice hitters park there. Some other interesting options you've got are Jose Abreu, $4,700 against Hahn. Had a day off his last time, so maybe he's nice and well rested. Obviously, Miguel Cabrera always in play. He had his 2 home runs yesterday. Looked absolutely ridiculously good at the plate. Hit one pretty much in the dirt into the seats. So he's always in play there. And, of course, Adrian Gonzalez, but I think I'm going to be playing him in my cash games as well if I can.
Yeah, I think so too. Not a ton of GPP guys I love today at first base with that elite upside. Goldschmidt's okay. He's really pricey though and facing a righty. He's a pretty strong play most of the time, but I just don't love that price for him. Pujols is probably the guy I'm going to target a ton in GPPs today. I feel pretty good about him. Facing that lefty, wind blowing out to left, like I mentioned at catcher. I like a lot of these right-handed bats for the Angels today. I'm hoping Pujols gets it going eventually. He's been really up and down so far this season. Brandon Belt's a guy that's interesting to me as a lefty facing Marquis. At Cincinnati, like we mentioned, he's a home run guy. Cincinnati's a home run park. I think that's just a solid matchup for him. Another guy in that price range, Matt Adams, facing a righty in Green, who's been really, really bad over his last couple starts, making a lot of mistakes. Adams hasn't been great this season, but I usually like targeting him against lefties if I can, or righties if I can, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris Davis also in play for me here, lefty against Jared Weaver. Jared Weaver's just been terrible against lefties this season, so I think he's certainly in play. Giving up 6 home runs already to lefties this season, so I think he's a nice high upside, double dong upside type of guy. And one more guy is Lucas Duda. Obviously, Kyle Loesch, if you're looking at his numbers, he's given up a ton of home runs, 10 already on the season. Duda's only got 3 so far, but we know he's got the power, and he's finally starting to hit the ball at a decent amount right now, too. And he's got 6 hits over his last 4 games. Actually, 8 over his last 5. So he's starting to get on base, showing a little bit of that power as well.
Yep, definitely.
All right, as we move on here to second base, There's some interesting options, but really not a whole lot at second base here. Howie Kendrick, you got against Eddie Butler. If you like the Dodgers, he's in play. Jason Kipnis is in lefty-lefty matchup, so not a great way I'm really trying to travel here. He's not particularly good against lefties.
Right.
Elsewhere, Joe Panic, I think, is an interesting play against Jason Marquis. Should be batting second. Not a ton of upside with him. He doesn't have a lot of power, but we already mentioned really small ballpark there. Jason Marquis makes a lot of mistakes. So I think that maybe he doesn't sit one of the seats, but if he gets on base, hits a couple doubles, you got those big bats, Lester Posey, Brandon Belt behind him. I think he makes for a nice play as well.
Yeah, I'll be looking a little bit at some of these cheaper guys in decent lefty-righty matchups. Scooter Gennett against Cologne. It's decent, 3,500 on DraftKings, right around 3,000 on FanDuel. I think he's a pretty decent play. The other guy that falls into that category is Devin Travis. Much tougher pitching matchup at 3,300 in the middle of a Toronto order that's been really crushing lefties. Feel okay about that. Colton Wong is probably another one I'll look at, but he's a little bit pricey on DraftKings, all the way up to 4,400. Facing green. Not hitting high enough in the order for me to justify 4,400 most of the time, though, but I can see that as a GPP play, especially if he gets up somewhere in like the 6th hole or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, I'm going to mention Luis Valbuena at home against R.A. Dickey. He's only 3,400. You can play him at second or third tonight on DraftKings. He's got a nice price on FanDuel as well at I'm losing it here. $3,000 on FanDuel as well. So
yeah.
Big time upside for you there. All right, let's move over here to third base. Oh, we should also mention Alex Guerrero at $3,200 on DraftKings if he's in the lineup. So big time upside there as well. All right, over here at third base, love Adrian Beltre. His price is really, really bad on DraftKings. Really tight, I guess I should say. 5,300. It's only 31 on FanDuel, so I like him a lot there. Josh Donaldson against a good lefty, but any lefty, he's certainly in play. He's $4,500 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, he is $3,800. So big time upside there. Not a cash game play at all, but certainly a ton of upside in tournaments.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit in tournaments too. I feel like he's one of the stronger tournament plays today.
Yep. Elsewhere at third base, you've got a few guys. Pablo Sandoval is interesting against J.A. Happ if you wanted to go that route. Obviously a pitcher's park, but that'll just keep its ownership down a little bit as well. And Manny Machado at $4,000 against Jared Weaver. It's righty-righty, but he's been swinging a really hot bat, and Jared Weaver has not looked very good this season at all.
Did we mention Donaldson already?
Yeah, let's mention him again. No, go ahead. I mean, he's a great tournament play tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's the guy that I'm looking at almost exclusively. I really like this Toronto lineup as a stack in general, just because anytime they face a lefty, they just have so much upside with those power righty bats. That's the guy I'm looking at for the most part today. Outside of that, there's just not anyone that I feel really strongly about. David Freese, I don't mind for 3,400. Another Angel, like I was talking about. I feel like he's an all right play. But I'm going to be trying to get Donaldson into my GPP lineups as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And Danny Valencia, cheap option. It's good against lefties. Men's salary on FanDuel and 29 on DraftKings. He's listed as day-to-day, but he pinch hit last night. I think he'll be fine tonight as well. All right, shortstop. As usual, not a ton of options. Hanley Ramirez on DraftKings at 4,200. Obviously a great play there. Marcus Semien is the most expensive guy. He's got some upside, but I'm not paying $4,300 for him tonight on DraftKings. Elsewhere, there's not a lot of upside as usual. Brandon Crawford's an interesting one. He's a shortstop with some power against Jason Marquis. He's listed at $4,100 on DraftKings and just $2,400 on FanDuel. So I think he's
I like him more there for sure.
Yeah, that price on FanDuel, great. Certainly priced considering his matchup tonight on DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to go against Clayton Kershaw, Troy Tulowitzki's only $3,600 on DraftKings, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'm not doing it either.
Yeah, if he looked like last year's Troy Tulowitzki, I might throw him in some tournaments, but he does not. So no thanks for me.
And he's still priced maybe not quite where he was last year, but he's still priced well above the rest of the shortstops. There's no one even close to him for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not a route I'll be traveling. Moving on to the outfield, Bryce Harper. I don't care what park it's in. When he's hitting the ball, he's mashing it. Looking patient at the plate, so he's got a nice high floor too. He's walking a ton. Odrisamer to Spain. Not very good contact pitcher, and good luck inducing contact with Bryce Harper right now.
Yeah, man, that's going to be a tough game for him.
Yeah, that's going to be terrifying.
Yeah. Other outfielders that I like quite a bit in GPPs tonight. Um, I mean, it's hard not to like Jock Peterson against Butler. Really strong play. He's down to 4,500 on DraftKings, which I love as a price there. Um, Mike Trout, absolutely love him tonight. I mentioned all the Angels. That's going to be a popular stack for me tonight in GPPs. I think they're going to be pretty low owned despite all the things working in their favor tonight. Hopefully they get it going for me at a nice low ownership percentage. Another interesting guy, or outfield in general, is the Yankees. Brett Gardner, solid play against a righty and Young, who I don't really believe in. He's been pretty decent so far this season, but I think he's going to fall apart at some point here. Obviously, the other side of that outfield, Jacoby Ellsbury, really strong play basically every day at this point. He's just been rock solid. Then the Toronto guys, Jose Bautista, another righty against a lefty there. One other guy that's a righty-righty matchup that I really like today is Matt Holliday. Green's been making a lot of mistakes, especially to power bats, and I mean Holliday's had some massive upside over the last 5 or 6 games. I think he's got 2 home runs in the last 5 games, 7 or 8 RBI. Seems like he's seen the ball really well, has a few walks. I think he's right in the middle of a hot streak right here, and this is another great matchup despite it being righty-righty. Marquis gets smoked by both sides of the plate for the most part.
And Holiday's quietly batting .336 also, so he's giving you a nice high floor there as well. A guy I really like is Giancarlo Stanton at home against Julio Teheran, fly ball pitcher. He's $4,600 on both sides. We know he can take any 1 yard, especially a guy who struggles with keeping the ball on the ground. So I like that. You already mentioned the Toronto bats, of course. Outside of that, looking at some cheap guys, Ryan Rayburn's an interesting play. I think against the lefty, I think he's a fine cash game play as well, especially on FanDuel where he's really, really cheap. But he's certainly in play there. And David Peralta's another guy that I like. Lefty against Chad Billingsley. Billingsley really struggling against lefties in his short time up this year after his few-year hiatus, but was never great against lefties anyway. Citizens Bank Park, not exactly a bad place for left-handed power either. And David Peralta always seems to fly under the radar.
Yeah, I like Billy Burns quite a bit too. Hitting from the right side of the plate today against Rodon. Just really cheap on both sides, under 3,000 on both. Hasn't been on base a ton lately. If he gets on base 2-3 times, he's guaranteed a steal. So he has some nice upside there, especially on DraftKings where that's rewarded pretty heavily. Got to feel pretty good about him if he's hitting leadoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy who's got a ton of power against another fly ball pitcher, Steven Souza, $4,200 on DraftKings, $33 on FanDuel. I mean, when this guy hits the ball, he crushes it. We know that Phil Hughes has a little bit of reverse splits there where he struggles against righties. We know he's never been a good ground ball pitcher, and he doesn't walk anyone, so it gives up a lot of contact. And Steven Souza likes to hit the ball a long way. Yeah,
absolutely. A couple other guys I like as far as cheaper outfielders. Ben Revere's okay if he's hitting leadoff again. Facing another righty, 2,600 on FanDuel, pretty solid play. Other interesting guy as far as power goes, Kyle Blanks. If he's in the lineup facing a lefty, guy with massive power. He's looked really good this season too, having a really nice start to the year. He's a guy that's always been hurt. When he's on the field, he provides a ton of power potential. He sat out the last 2 games. Hopefully he's back in the lineup today against a lefty. That's what I'm hoping for. I know Moreland's been taking some of his playing time now that he's not injured anymore, but I really hope he's in the lineup today because I feel like he's a really strong play GPP-wise at that price.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. You can play him at first base or the outfield. You're probably going to play him in the outfield anyway, but yeah, I definitely like that call. And Colby Rasmus, another guy with a ton of power, facing off against R.A. Dickey. He's nice and cheap. $3,400 on DraftKings is a really great price for him. And he's got a nice price on FanDuel at $28 as well. So, all right, anybody else you want to highlight before we get out of here?
I think that's everybody I was looking at for the most part. There's a few more outfielders we could go through, but I think we highlighted most of the top GPP plays as far as those go.
All right, sounds good. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. As always, our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com for this slate and every other slate, and we will see you guys tomorrow.